Well, wonderful to be with you. I'm looking out on this vast gathering of old friends and new friends. I want to welcome all of you who are here for the first time. You have found your tribe, whether you know it or not. This is going to be a wonderful, lifelong relationship. I was reminded by a friend in India who I wrote the book Shakti Leadership with, that today is a very auspicious day, actually. It's celebrated as a day of enlightenment in India. It's not only a full moon, but also Buddha's birthday today. So again, we are starting this journey on a day that is deeply significant because this is about enlightenment. This is about a different way, a higher consciousness with which to live and to work. So we're going to talk about conscious capitalism. Before we dive into that, I do want to talk about capitalism itself. By the way, the timer says 1:24. I don't know if that means an hour and 24 minutes, but if you can adjust that. Most of us don't realize what capitalism has done for humanity. And even as a business professor, after, 30 years of teaching, I had no idea until we wrote that last book, the Conscious Capitalism book. This is an idea that's relatively new, and if you look at human history, it has been very different. So this is 2,000 years of economic history. Per capita incomes were below $500 for most of that time and going back as long as you want, which means 90% of people lived on less than $1 a day. And nothing really changed even as we came out of the Dark Ages and we had the Renaissance and the flourishing of art and printing, and then we had reason and enlightenment and Newton and Galileo. All of these things were big breakthroughs for humanity, had no impact on ordinary humans. What finally changed was in the 18th century when we had a few things that came together. The Industrial Revolution in Scotland, and also in Scotland, a book called The Wealth of Nations by a moral philosopher named Adam Smith, who first explained the power of the market, that prosperity is explained by freedom. That was his question. Why do some countries prosper and others do not? It's not about resources and work ethic. It really has to do with freedom, where ordinary people have freedom really to be in charge of their own destiny and to decide what they want to do with their lives. Those societies will prosper. And those ideas found full expression in this country because the Declaration of Independence happened the same year that the Wealth of Nations was published. And this oxygen of freedom that enabled at least part of society, of course, we know many segments were excluded, but the ideas were very powerful. And it's taken us a couple of hundred years to get close to that. And all of humanity has been inspired by that document. And you can see it has enabled humanity to take off almost on a vertical trajectory. Per capita incomes, after being flat for thousands of years, have risen 1,500%, much more than that in many countries. Life expectancy has gone from 28 to about 73. Literacy has gone from 13% to 87%. And extreme poverty has gone from 90% to about 9% now, living below $1.90, which is the standard, right? So a lot of progress, tremendous impact of this idea rooted in freedom and dignity, right? Free markets and free people. That's really what capitalism is. So it's done a lot for humanity. And yet, if you look around, at the culture that we're in and the way people think about business, you actually find that there's been a long-term trend of people are getting more and more cynical and distrustful about business. This has been going on at least for 40 years that Gallup has been tracking this. 80% plus of Americans don't have confidence in big business. And this is the home of global capitalism. So there's something in the way in which we are enacting this, the way we are talking about capitalism and the way we are actually bringing it to fruition, that is not working, it's not resonating, it's not inspiring people. And when you're not inspired, when you're cynical and distrustful, you cannot be innovative, you cannot be creative. You're operating from a survival mode. And this is therefore a big challenge for all of us. Not only do we want meaning and purpose, but we collectively need the fruits of human innovation and creativity. We have to reinvent every aspect of our lives in the next 100 years. We cannot continue to do anything the same way. We will not survive on this planet. So this is a matter of some urgency that we figure out what has gone wrong. We took this beautiful idea, empowering one of the most powerful ideas human beings have ever had, rooted in freedom and dignity, and somehow by the way in which we are operationalizing it, it is simply not working. And I think one of the biggest factors is this whole story around profit being the only purpose, the only legitimate purpose of business. And this is not only a selfish way of thinking, because businesses not only impact the owners, they impact everybody whose lives are touched. It also views people as means to an end. The well-being of people should be an end in itself. It views them as instruments, and it's a very narrow way of thinking. As Muhammad Yunus has said, money is not the only game in town. There are other games in town. And we narrow it down to just money for one stakeholder, the shareholder. And here's the irony, it doesn't even work. The more you're obsessed with profit maximization, the more I can guarantee your company over time will lose its ability to generate profits, because you're going to end up squeezing all of the things that actually create value in the business. What's the evidence of that? You can see ever since this became sort of the received dogma in the early 70s with Friedman and others, return on assets, the overall profitability or shareholder returns at the level of the economy have actually gone down. Shareholder value theory has failed even on its own narrow terms, which is making money. It's not even making money, it's making less money. And by the way, where is that less money going? It is predominantly going into the pockets of a few. This is a real issue. It's not just a politicized issue. Now look at 35 years flat incomes for workers, 1,000% increases for executives, and that's just in terms of pay. Now what happens in terms of the wealth, the shareholder value? Where is that going? Over a 10-year period, 54% went to share buybacks and 37% went to dividends, which means only 9% left over to invest in the future and R&D, to improve people's lives, to do all of those things. This is rewarding today's shareholders, which, by the way, includes the executives, the CEOs, and others. This is milking the business for today and this quarter and the next year. This is actually an enormous problem. This is what leads to revolutions. This is a real problem. And Peter Georgescu, in his new book, says for the past 4 decades, capitalism has slowly been committing suicide. We've taken this extraordinary institution. We are in danger of losing this, because the rules of the game have become cancerous. They're killing us. We cannot continue down this path. Okay? So we fundamentally have to change the way we think about business. And if you think about the ways in which we have talked about business, so Calvin Coolidge in the 20s, just before the Great Depression, gave a speech. He said, the business of America is business. And that is actually true. This is a country that was born with a spirit of entrepreneurialism, right? A free enterprise. It does beg the question, what is the business of business? If you say, okay, that's the business of America. And Alfred Sloan, the person who built General Motors into sort of the prototypical large corporation in the world, said it's very simple. The business of business is business. Okay? You make money, right? We do our job. Government's supposed to do their job. Education does their job. Nonprofits do their thing. It's pretty simple, right? Stay in your lane. We much prefer the words of a leader right here in Dallas, the person who, to me, is the most conscious leader that I've ever met or even read about, Herb Kelleher, who built Southwest Airlines into the most successful airline in the history of the world. He said, business of business is people, yesterday, today, and forever. Human flourishing is the highest value. Everything is a means to that end. Profits are a means to that end. Human well-being is not a means to profit. It's the other way around. And this is, I think, what we have to get back to, or actually we never consciously there. We have to put human beings at the center. Human dignity, as the Pope talks about. Human dignity is at the center. So that's one set of reasons. But another set of factors has to do with the amount of change in the world. All of us, almost all of us in this room, have lived through extraordinary amount of change in our lifetime. Just in the last 25 to 30 years, there have been tectonic shifts. The world has changed dramatically, almost beyond recognition, and we human beings have evolved tremendously, and yet businesses haven't been able to keep up with all this change. It's like we're using an operating system that was developed in the 18th century, or parts of the 19th century, using the military as the organizing metaphor. Because the only large entities that existed, large organizations, were armies. So as organizations started to grow to scale, they were looking to armies to say, how do we organize, how do we lead, how do we manage, how do we do all this? So the whole idea of the hierarchical structure, the command and control approach to leadership, the language of strategy, tactics, operations, front lines, headquarters, staff line, all of those things, boots on the ground. I mean, our language is replete with military metaphors. We treat business as a form of war. Business is not war. War is the ultimate lose-lose game in the world. Business is the ultimate win-win game in the world. We have to change our metaphors. We need a new operating system, which is what this is really about. So now if you look at the changes that have happened, there's a particular turning point, 1989. So 1776 and now 1989, significant turning points in human history. Beginning of a new era, which we call the age of transcendence in the book Forms of Endearment. What happened in 89? There were a bunch of headlines I can just give you. The Berlin Wall came down, was brought down by people craving freedom. And suddenly the defining debate of the 20th century between these competing ideologies, how do you organize human society? Democracy, capitalism, freedom, versus communism, socialism, government ownership and control of every aspect of your life. These were competing visions and everybody had to line up, you're with us or you're against us. And then without a gunshot being fired, that debate was over. We thought it would end with a nuclear holocaust. There was mutually assured destruction on both sides. We thought it would go on for centuries. But it was over because that was an unnatural system. There was universal consensus, some form of liberal democracy rooted in free markets. Before that, in June, we had Tiananmen Square in China. which kind of inspired. I mean, that did not end well. Those heroic kids were killed, hundreds of them. But it did inspire people around the world to say, wow, if those kids can stand up to the Red Army, maybe we can too. It was also the Exxon Valdez oil spill, the awakening of environmental consciousness on a broader scale than we had seen in the past. Also the emergence of religious fundamentalism, re-emergence on the world stage through the fatwa issued by the Ayatollah in Iran against an author. And we've had to deal with the consequences of religious fundamentalism since, and there have been counter, Christian fundamentalism, Hindu fundamentalism, etc. So the end of economic fundamentalism, but the re-emergence of religious fundamentalism. Another thing happened in 1989, where we had a demographic tipping point. There were more adults over the age of 40 than below. So median age reached midlife. And with midlife comes a crisis. It's real. It's a crisis of meaning and purpose, where people have lived their life up to that point based on a lot of material, worldly measures, indicators of success. If I achieve this, kind of what Sean was talking about, right? If I achieve this, this, and this, I'll feel fulfilled, and yet they feel empty, right? And that hunger for meaning and purpose becomes very pronounced for a lot of people at that stage. And this is a global phenomenon. Birth rates are falling, life expectancy increasing, median age is rising everywhere. It's 44 in this country, it's high 40s in Europe, it's well into the 50s in Japan and Korea, and so forth. So many, many more people are at that stage of life where they're craving meaning and purpose. It's a mainstream thing now. 1989 was also the year that Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. Believe it or not. It all happened in that year, right? And because of that, ordinary people are now have access to more information instantaneously at their fingertips, anytime, any place, on any subject for free than the richest billionaire in the world did 20 years ago. That's what we call a true fact in Washington. Okay, you got true facts, you got all kinds of facts, okay? True fact. I had a question the other day and my daughter got the answer in 1/3 of a second. I said, how do you do that? And she said, Dad, what did you guys do in the old days? I said, I don't know, I don't remember the old days, when you could not find an answer to every question you had. But people are completely informed over everything that's happening anywhere in the world 5 minutes ago, 5,000 years ago, inside your company, inside the government. There are no secrets. It's glass walls everywhere. We are also incredibly connected. So here's another true fact. 1995, half the people on this planet had neither made or received a single phone call in their entire lifetime. That was as recently as 95. Today, there are more phone numbers than there are people. There are 300 million smartphone subscribers in this country of 330 million. Okay, the babies don't have it yet, but that's about it. So we are incredibly connected. Social media, right? All of those things. Humanity is like one shared central nervous system. Anything happening anywhere can be known and acted upon instantaneously. It's like meetups and flash mobs and Arab Springs and women's marches, and all these things can coalesce around shared energies because of that underlying infrastructure. We are also becoming more intelligent. James Flynn is an IQ researcher. He found that our intelligence is rising 3 to 4% a decade for the last 8 decades. What that means is the person with an average IQ of 100 today, in the year 1938, would have an IQ of 134. It would place them in the top 2% of intelligence. Average person today would be considered a near genius 1 human lifetime ago. Think about that. Ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things. And I think perhaps the biggest change that's happening is the rise of feminine values. For millennia, human societies have been run by men on a limited set of masculine values. This is the century when all of that finally changes. 19th century was about the end of slavery, 20th was about the end of totalitarianism, and the 21st is about the end of the sidelining of the feminine in human society. It's like the bird of humanity has been flying for millennia with one wing tied behind its back, the feminine wing. And this is the century where that can unfold. And education, by the way, is the great equalizer. 60% of college students are women now, across all industrialized nations. They get higher grades and they graduate at a higher rate. And white-collar professions are already statistically dominated and will be. And leadership also will reflect that as it already is. And with that will come now a recognition that the so-called feminine values, nurturing, caring, empathy, compassion, openness, these are all human values. They're all inside us. We need to access and integrate the mature masculine with the mature feminine, as opposed to everything being aggression, domination, competition, winning, results at all costs. That is literally killing us. There's a new book called Dying for a Paycheck by Jeffrey Pfeffer, showing the toxic effects of the way in which our cultures operate, which are predominantly masculine energy. The immature masculine energy. And finally, we're becoming more conscious. We are waking up. Our entire journey on this planet is one of waking up, which means we're understanding now the consequences of our action. That which was okay in the past is no longer okay. Slavery was part of the human condition from thousands of years ago until 150 years ago. Now we can't imagine it. Women didn't have the right to vote 100 years ago. We still had colonialism, another form of slavery 75 years ago. We still had segregation in this country 50 years ago. We had apartheid in South Africa 30 years ago. We had no rights for gay people 20 years ago. And there are things that are happening today that will change our prison system, our animal factory farming system, all of these things. We're going to look back in horror and say, my God, how did we tolerate that as conscious human beings? We're also becoming more peaceful. Right? And so these are major changes. So with all of that change, how can we continue thinking about anything the same way? We have to re-examine everything. As Lincoln said, the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. And that applies to every aspect of life, including business, certainly. So what will it take? What needs to change? And this is where we need to kind of rethink all of the key questions. Why do we exist? Why are we in business? What are we trying to do other than profit? So that's the why question. What are we doing? We're creating value not just for shareholders, but for all stakeholders. Who are we as leaders? Right? Conscious leadership. And how do we operate in our company? So all of these questions have different answers today than they used to. And by the way, many business schools are still teaching the old answers. It's all about profit, it's all about shareholders, it's all about this, right? And for each of these, very quickly, we'll introduce an acronym that kind of captures that. Starting with purpose. I believe every great purpose at some level needs to be a healing purpose. Why? Because we still live in a world of extraordinary pain and suffering. Physical violence has decreased, but psychic suffering is greatly on the rise all over the world. And a lot of it has to do with the way we work, but also other conditions that exist. And if we're not part of the healing, we may be part of the hurting. And that's a new book, actually, that Michael Gelb, who's going to be speaking later today, he and I are writing, called The Healing Organization. But it also stands for the qualities of a great purpose. Great purposes are heroic. They're trying to change the world for the better. They evolve as a company evolves and society evolves. They align all the stakeholders together. You literally are not at cross purposes when you have a shared purpose. But when you don't have a shared purpose, everybody's looking to maximize their own profit, so to speak. Customers want the lowest price. Employees want to work as little and get paid as much. Suppliers want the highest margin. Society wants the highest taxes, right? But when you have a shared purpose, everybody's on the same side. It's rooted in love and care. It's inspiring, natural, and galvanizing. Okay, the second is stakeholders, and here the acronym is SPICE, and actually spicy. Now, why spicy? You know, in India, everything has to have spice, okay? What is life without spice? But it really stands for the stakeholders in the right order. Start with society. We have to be on the right side of society. We cannot be part of the problem. We have enough problems. Business cannot be adding to our problems while creating livelihood and products and services. Partners, investors, customers, we need to think about a different way of each of these stakeholders, not exploiting them and using them to make money, but serving them. In order to win, we have to give. If everybody gives, the more you give, the more you receive. So everybody becomes a giver to that system. They all rally around that purpose, those values, everybody's in it together. It creates extraordinary amounts of value of all kinds, not just financial. Okay, leadership. Now, when you leave India, they tell you you should use a Gandhi slide in every talk. He's like our Yogi Berra, we can use him for anything. And you can make him say anything you want. But this is something he may have said or he should have said. We must be the change we wish to see. You cannot have a conscious business unless you have a conscious leader, and you cannot be a conscious leader unless you're a conscious human being. And leadership matters as much as it ever did, even though people are smarter and more informed and more conscious and more caring and all of those kinds of things. The fact is leadership still matters. As Drucker said, only 3 things happen naturally in organizations: friction, confusion, underperformance. Everything else takes leadership. And the leader steps into a role to say, where are we trying to go? Creates a compelling vision. And then how do we get there? So without leadership, nothing happens. The smartest people in the world can't accomplish anything without leadership. And the word here is selfless. You cannot be a selfish human being and call yourself a leader. If you are trying to use other people to achieve your personal objectives, that makes you a tyrant. That is the very definition of a tyrant. A true leader is there to take people to a better place, to create that vision, and then collectively, how do we get there? They have transcended the self. It's a level beyond self-actualization, self-transcendence, as Viktor Frankl talked about. And then it stands for all of these qualities, as you can see. You can see a blending of masculine and feminine. We need to be strong, we need to be loving. Martin Luther King says, be tough-minded and tender-hearted. We need both. It's not either or. It's not saying I prefer to breathe in or breathe out. We need to do both. Okay, we need that combination. And emotional, spiritual, and systems intelligence, all of which, by the way, can be learned. IQ is fixed. But these things can be grown dramatically and tremendously in our lifetimes. Right? So those are the qualities of great leaders. And finally, culture. As Drucker again said, culture eats strategy for lunch, We don't think it waits. There's no MBA student that doesn't know the strategy of every company, every great company in the world. But you can't replicate them because the cultures are unique. And here the acronym is tactile, which is something you can feel. You can touch and feel a culture, even though it's invisible. And it stands for all of these qualities: trust, authenticity, accountability, caring, etc. And I'm going to just focus on this word caring. If you had to say what is the one big difference between a conscious business and a traditional businesses are built purely on self-interest, one pillar, one dimension of what it means to be a human being. There's another dimension that's equally powerful, if not more, which is the need to care. Adam Smith wrote another book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments that was about that, but we forgot about that. Capitalism had a mother and a father. We forgot the mother energy, the caring energy. It was all about self-interest. So can you build businesses on self? This is the question that Whole Foods, John Mackey and others asked. We want to build a company on love and care. Because we look around, most businesses are filled with fear and stress. That's why we have, thank God it's Friday. Right? Nobody questions that idea, right? We survived another hellish week at work. Now we get to live, we get to party, we get drunk, and then we do it again. And then Sunday rolls around, and then what? Well, 4 a.m. Monday morning is the peak of heart attacks. Our work is literally killing us. Terrorists and murderers are not. Okay, violence is down 90%. Okay, but this kind of suffering is up dramatically. Suicides are up. All these things are up. Stress related to work. Employee engagement, US is the highest in the world at 32. Worldwide, only 15% are engaged. 50% are disengaged. 16% in the US are actively, they are hostile. They hate their work, they hate their company. I heard Tom Gardner use this analogy. He said it's like a boat with 10 people rowing on it. 3 are actually rowing. 5 are skimming the surface, looking quite busy, and 2 are hitting other people over the head with their paddles. That's the state of affairs at the average company, and that's an enormous financial drain, but it's also a human tragedy. We only have this one life to live, except those of us from India, we have many. You guys, one life, 100,000 hours to work, okay? And work is inherently meaningful in a human life. As Freud said, love and work are the cornerstones of what it means to be human. And yet we have created a wall between these. Leave your humanity at the door, do that on your own time. When you come to work, you're at battle. Right? Why can't we combine these two things? That's what this whole journey is about, combining love and work. And that's what my research was that got me into this for a book called Firms of Endearment, which were companies that were described with all of these kinds of words: compassion, love, caring, etc. And we found at the end of that research, when we did the financial analysis, that they actually outperformed the market dramatically. 9-1 in the original research, 7-1 over a 20-year period in the second edition. Even though they're paying their people better, providing better benefits, investing in their communities, investing in their suppliers, paying taxes at a higher rate, still they're making more money. How is that even possible? Well, it's possible because they're creating lots of value by engaging people at a deeper level. They make a lot of money, and profit is important. Profit is a social good. It is socially irresponsible not to be profitable. Without profits, we don't have taxes, and we don't have infrastructure, and we don't have public education, and we don't have all those things that we need. And these companies are highly profitable, but it matters how you make the money. Because you can make money by squeezing everybody else, or you can make the money by also serving all of the other stakeholders. So conscious businesses create many kinds of wealth, because businesses create but also destroy wealth. Think about it. And there are at least 8 kinds. Financial, of course, but intellectual capital, all the breakthroughs, social capital, trust and cohesion, within the company but also within society, emotional well-being operating from love and care, not fear and stress, spiritual well-being, having meaning and purpose in our life through work, cultural well-being, the impact on what is a good life. $1 trillion of marketing has a huge impact on how people think about their life. Impact on our bodies, the impact on the environment. A conscious business tries to have a positive impact in all these areas for all of their stakeholders as long as they exist, and a traditional business will say, well, we're all about making money and everything else is a side effect. And unfortunately, side effects tend to be negative. The reality is there's no such thing on this planet called a side effect. We do things and there are effects. Now, just because you put it in fine print and say it fast doesn't make it less important. This is about doing business with a spectrum of positive effects. It does exist, therefore it is possible. We know that this can be done. It is being done. So in conclusion, conscious capitalism, now it's a 10-plus year journey for us. We know that this system works, and it works for everybody. Okay? We have to have a system that works for everybody, not just for a few. And there are a lot of practical reasons why these companies tend to sell more, they grow faster, they have perhaps lower gross margins because they're paying their people well, suppliers well, but they have higher net margins. They're not spending a lot of money on marketing, on employee turnover, and they have tremendous levels of employee engagement, much lower marketing costs, retention, passion, creativity. All of it's human beings that create success create the value in any business, right? Lower legal costs, lower administrative costs, far greater resilience in tough times, greater well-being and flourishing. It's a way of doing business that everybody matters and everybody can win. So again, I want to welcome you to this event and have a wonderful next couple of days. I look forward to meeting many of you over these things. Thank you.